Good evening, good night, good morning, wherever you may be, and welcome to a special presentation of International Men's Day and Voice of Men 360. Before we go any further, let me give you some information about our group, Voice of Men 360. My name is Chanram Parita, and I am the Outreach and Development Coordinator at Voice of Men 360. Voice of Men 360 is a non-profit organization founded in 2020 and based in London, Ontario, Canada. Voice of Men 360 was born out of seeing a tremendous need and stepping up to provide services to help, support, and overcome men and boys' life challenges. We are part of International Men's International Men's Day has been serving for over 21 years and so far in over 90 countries. That's 90. Joined together and doing various activities regularly. International Men's Day follows 6 pillars, which is for the overall well-being of boys and men. We follow in the same footsteps. There are today's before I go any further, uh, today's topic is zero male suicide, and we have a distinguished panel hosted by the equally eloquent Kerry Wilson, a certified child and youth worker with over 15 years experience. So, as I said, the topic being zero male suicide. Um, there are many contributing factors to the cause of zero male, sorry, of male suicides worldwide. Some of these include social stigma, financial pressures, relationship pressures, and not forgetting family courts decisions. There are potential solutions that are put out there, like social awareness, mental health support, redressing the family court system, just to name a few. So, without further ado, let's hand you over to Kerry Wilson, who's going to initiate a candlelight vigil and take it from there. Over to you, Kerry.
Hi, everybody. Good night. So I just want to take a moment. I just wanted to take a moment to do light our candles, get our candles out, and light our candles to recognize the lost lives and suicide of the victims of suicide. And if everybody can stand and a moment of silence for them. Just a moment. Thank you. Thanks, everybody, as we get ourselves resituated. I will read the disclaimer. Voice of Men 360's disclaimer. We would like to remind you that Voice of Men 360's mission is always delivered with good faith towards peaceful harmony. The views and opinions expressed in today's episode are those of our speakers and do not necessarily represent Voice of Men 360. Our organization engages in discussion forums to offer inspiration and create awareness of the issues of men who wish to overcome their life challenges. We are not providing medical or therapeutic advice. Should you require the type of assistance, we recommend you contact a medical professional immediately. If you have any questions or concerns about today's episode or any Voice of Men 360's content, please email us at info@voiceofmen360.org. Thank you so much. So as we start our show today, I would like to, for our guests to introduce themselves and just give us tell us a little bit about your background and a little bit, one fun fact about yourself. So I will start with, I'll start with Rima.
Hi. As you know, I'm a psychotherapist, a mental health professional, and I've experience of doing this work since a few decades, and that's all what I know. That's how I joke about myself, that I don't know anything else but my work, and I enjoy it thoroughly. So it's been many years that I'm in this profession, a PhD, and now I am a founder along with a small team of psychotherapists providing services to individuals and organizations. And fun factor is that my daughter finds me boring. rest of them don't. But my daughter says, "Mom, you're the most boring person." So that's all I could think of spontaneously. There would be more. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sure you're not boring. Thank you so much for introducing yourself, and that's a cute fun fact. Kamran?
Working in different countries, have worked, and started working on men's issues back in 87, 88, and then did a lot of work in Pakistan and around the world, 18 years with the United Nations. So working on other issues, also psychological, but in addition, men's, because I'd started with the earlier men's movement. This was way back, starting out in California. So from that to then doing groups and workshops, etc., in Pakistan and other countries, and now based in Canada, but have some cross-cultural experience. So doing gender work and then clinical psychology work, and have written a book on understanding men, social issues, being involved with women's issues all my life, looking at those things from the male perspective and bringing that perspective. So glad to be here.
Thanks for coming, Kamran, Dr. Kamran. I can't see the next. Can I see the everybody? Thank you. So the next person is Daniel.
Yeah, so good evening, everyone. I'm Daniel. I've been working in mental health for many years, and I work out of London, Ontario, as a registered psychotherapist. I was scrambling to try and think of a fun fact, and I think that maybe slightly fun is that I've been working on writing a novel for good 3 years, and maybe one day I'll have a final draft and stuff to be able to go somewhere else with it. But it's been a really good learning experience.
That's nice. Do you want to give us a little sneak peek about what your novel's about?
Well, it's basically a science fiction novel about trying to sort of imagine a future where we're trying to not only sort out living on one planet, but living along multiple planets with multiple different species. So sort of extending, I think, some of the learning challenges that we have in the world now into maybe some iterations that might be to come way in the future. So anyway, it's a fun way of dealing with stuff that's actually present and I deal with every day with people now, but trying to look at it in a more distanced, reflective way.
Nice. Sounds interesting. Can't wait to hear more about it. Janice?
So this is an introduction, right?
Yes. Just tell us about
Okay.
yourself, and one fun fact.
Okay, so my name is Janice Poitras, and I am Cree from the Treaty 6 Nation out in the Saskatchewan area. And a fun fact is my family races in what we call Indian relay. So it's like a extreme sport in the area of horse racing.
Nice. Do you just want to tell us a little bit about your suicide prevention, facilitation, Indigenous work?
Sure thing. So I am a Safe Talk trainer. And so Safe Talk provides attendees with the confidence to talk about suicide. And of course, that's always the biggest thing. I'm a strong believer in providing a safe environment for that conversation to occur. And there's always courage in having that initial conversation. And so that's really the goal of the Safe Talk training. And so in addition to Safe Talk training, I'm working on being ASSIST certified. And so ASSIST is another level to Safe Talk where you actually participate in an intervention to suicide prevention. So,
That's awesome.
So yeah.
It's awesome. Awesome. And
That's
how many years did you say you were doing this?
So Safe Talk has only been a year. Assist has only been about a year as well. But I've actually had experience with participating and actually in a suicide prevention project for the past 15 years on my own First Nation. At one time, my nation was one of the highest rates of suicide. And so we had been approved for a proposal through Health Canada to create this project, which was called the Pamatsuan Project, which was the Good Life Project. And so I helped to manage that program for a couple years.
Nice. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Janice. Did you already introduce yourself? You're right.
Well, I just can add that I'm retired. I'm part of Voice Man 360, and I try to get out there and help as many people as I can. And so far it's been going well, so I'm happy about that. And one, I guess, fun fact is sometimes I get carried away with music, and I have my headphones on in the street, and I sometimes catch myself dancing in the street. So, it's.
That's always a fun fact. That's really cute. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. I love to hear your fun facts. I know it's always something like, I don't know what a fun fact is about myself. But my fun fact is I enjoy makeup and playing and looking and all things pretty. So like playing in makeup and practicing and learning, self-taught myself how to do it. So that's my fun fact. As we go into this heavy topic, I just want us to take a deep breath and just settle our minds, calm ourselves, so that we can go into this heavy subject and share with everybody. And everybody who's online, please feel free to ask questions in the comment boxes, and we will definitely try to get to them. I want to start off first by just talking about a little bit about starting off the facts about Black men and suicide. So, a report published by the CDC showed that suicide rates among persons aged 10 to 24 years increased significantly during 2028 to 2021 amongst Black persons. Rates also climbed for Black Americans. It was very difficult to find Canadian statistics, so I'm using American. We'll just say Canada would be around that as well, with a 9.2% increase from 2018. The reasons for the rising suicide rates in the Black communities are complex and faceted, with factors such as racism, discrimination, socioeconomic disparities, and limited access to mental health resources playing a major role. It's essential to address these underlying issues and provide support and resources to individuals at risk. So I wanted to just tap upon that, as well as to go into asking my first question. And I think it would be great to start off with the risk factors of suicide. And anybody can open that up.
I'll start.
Thanks, Janice.
So, of course, the risk factors is going to be poverty level, access to resources, and intergenerational trauma or active trauma. So those would be my, yeah.
I would like to add a little.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Rima.
So I think life transitions play a big role, whether it is about a breakup or a heartbreak or a job loss, or it is those who come out of maybe coming out of rehab or coming out of prison. So major transitions, and culturally looking at the expectations from men, how you're not supposed to, boys don't cry, you need to be very strong, you need to take up responsibility, and so on. So these transitions are hard for anyone, but these definitely cause a sense of hopelessness. There is a common factor which lead to such thoughts and suicidal ideation. There's been also a lot of data to show that intoxication, substance abuse, and especially alcoholism also increases the risk. And of course, it's no brainer to imagine that mental health concerns, especially depression, even personality issues, and impulsiveness, all these factors often contribute. They are major risk factors to these ideations and attempts.
Thank you, Rima. Anyone else want to take that on?
So I just wanted to add, in addition to or along with the hopelessness, is sometimes the sense of helplessness or purposelessness, like sense that one's reason for living, for example, isn't like clear and present, and one's struggling to try to find a reason to go on to live another day.
Thank you, Daniel. Anyone else want to take that question?
I can add, and again briefly for now, but we can go into details of this. I'm sure on many levels will come, but I think the whole socialization of men in a patriarchy puts men at risk of all kinds of issues, mental health issues, and social issues, and pushes us towards suicide. And one can make direct or indirect links to all the traits that define almost a patriarchy. Men being strong, men being not expressive, men not being on their own, not needing help, in terms of not communicating emotions, not crying is the more obvious one. But down the line, and being disconnected enough in relationships to take on professions that the society requires them to take on, and sometimes the power structures in the society want them to take on, like using violence, army, etc. There is a requirement to create the psyche in a certain way which pushes us towards suicide. These are, again, I'm just kind of touching on this. We can go into the details of some of these things of how society pushes us. But patriarchy, however you define it and understand it, is the risk factor that pushes men towards a range of things, extreme being suicide, one of the extremes being suicide.
Anybody else want to take that up? Okay, so we'll go on to our next question. And our next question is, it's around the same societal pressures. So let's talk a little bit more about how the societal pressures contribute to higher suicidal rates in men. And it's popcorn style, so whoever wants to take that on can go first.
Can I continue then? Okay.
Yeah,
you're just talking about society.
It tied into what you were saying, so
yeah,
that's great.
So I think there's a value, and the payoffs could be for society in general, but sometimes, this power and privilege and position that men have in a patriarchy, we are in a higher privileged position. Privilege is a big thing these days, no? And as the victimhood kind of is a currency, privilege is the other thing that we really talk about. Everything is in power dynamics and privilege. The price that is not that we pay, that almost has like we do it consciously, but that we are required to pay, that is taken away, what is taken away for us in exchange for this quote unquote privilege that we are given, is that we are trained from beginning to be disconnected enough, where women are, it is acceptable for them in almost all, especially traditional patriarchal societies, to connect with each other, to sit together, to take time to talk to each other, to connect, to love, to in a loving, huggy kind of a way. And men are pushed into rough, tough. I mean, my friends who've talked to me about their teenage sons who are just not, manly enough, and what do I need to do to push him into, so they get them into taekwondo, into, that is still a nicer form, but into rougher sports, and concerned about him sitting at home and talking to his sisters. And so we are pushed into not connecting too much, not communicating about hard things too much. Not crying is too much of an obvious, but there are such subtle little things that we constantly receive these messages, to not get too connected, not to get too engaged on a heart level. So all the tools that we need later on to deal with emotional problems, to be able to talk things out, to be able to ask for help, to be able to show our weaknesses, to be able to show our vulnerabilities. I'm hurt. This hurts me. It's so hard for us to say that. I'm hurt. I need someone to hold my hand. I would just need a hug. I need someone to sit and talk to me. I don't even know how to ask. I don't even know how to even acknowledge that I need that. It's just we are pushed so far that we lose touch with that. And I think all of that is done because we are, at a moment's notice, we are required to leave with the troops to far off lands, or to be a security guard somewhere. I know many women do these duties also, but it has been required of men, whether they are working on oil rigs or working in emergency humanitarian support, majority of it, I've been involved in it for 2 decades, end up being men in the hardship duty stations and in the worst of environments. And the society requires them to do that and to do a range of, I mean, that's an extreme, but things that in order to prime our men to perform these tasks, it's a requirement that they should not be too emotionally connected, too connected to, oh, what my child is doing today. If he has to take off for 6 months, you cannot be too emotionally engaged. So society trains us from the beginning for certain roles that are required of us. Now, whether women are beneficiaries of that or not, certainly they don't do it consciously. But there is, we talk about privilege and position, but there are benefits of making men the way they are, which serves a purpose for the society, which serves a purpose for other men and women around, but again, this, they're not going to go beyond that. Okay, not into politically incorrect. Go ahead, Daniel. Oh,
I wanted to add to what you're saying. I really like those points. I definitely think patriarchy has influenced a lot of the way our world runs. I also like, hopefully you'd agree that I think maybe the way some of the things you're talking about of the roles that are masculine roles and the roles that are feminine roles don't necessarily have to be the enduring roles for the future of our civilization, right? Hopefully
yes.
we're moving towards maybe something that's more equitable. And like, for example, one of my hardships in my life was when our daughter was young. I was the stay-at-home father for a while, and that was one of the hardest roles I've ever played, was being a parent to a young child. And that certainly isn't the traditional masculine role, to be that nurturing presence and so forth, right? But hopefully there's room for growth for all of us.
Lucky you.
Does anybody else want to take on that, Janice? Okay, so we're going to come back to Janice. Rima, is anything else you want to tap in to this question? You're mute. You're mute.
Sorry about that. No, I do agree with what Kamran said and what Daniel said. There are a number of issues. Yes, patriarchy, and even otherwise, like those masculine roles, as Daniel mentioned. Yeah, those sometimes make it, not sometimes, those often make it harder for men, for sure.
Thank you. So my next question is, are there specific age groups that are more at risk for suicide amongst men in your years of working? Do you guys feel that there's a different, like, specific age groups that we should focus on more, or is it
There's statistics for middle-aged people, middle-aged men. There's also a good number of statistics for adolescents and youth. So, well, it's I won't say one particular age group that we need to focus. We need to focus on the idea of advocacy, of spreading awareness that we are trying today, something like that. That needs to go on, and irrespective of whoever gets to get the message or understand the concern. I think it's a huge chunk. I don't know if Dr. Kamran or Daniel have different views on that, but I think most everyone is at risk once they begin to experience life and experience challenges and experience stresses, and adolescence onwards. It's pretty, and now we've seen and we have heard of even children succumbing to that. So it's really hard to focus on one group. But there is research to show that middle-aged men are quite at high risk.
Okay. Can I add to that? Yeah. So I think the challenges change from time to time, from phase to phase in a man's life, in my experience. So the issues around adolescence, uh, early childhood is for girls, boys. It's similar kinds of issues, but adolescence onwards, when men are forming their masculine identity, so when they are forming their gender identity, that's a critical period when there are certain kinds of issues, and then middle age is a different kind, and then towards the end it's just that's the heartbreaking one. Even though youth, I work more with youth than with any other age group, the adolescents and early teens, late teens and early 20s. But the most heartbreaking one for me are the later years, 60, 70 plus, when men lose what the society has given them as the primary role to provide and to be actively producing something, which often gets connected to either the position that they hold or the money that they earn. And when they stop doing that, the definition of who am I then and what good am I to others. So, if for around the mother and women, the relationships, they continue through life until you die, though those relationships. For men, when they come back, many times they've been absent from the family emotionally, sometimes physically. And then when they come back, they're not as connected. And then to not have the work to give meaning or justification or reason for existing for them, it is very hard for them to struggle with what is the purpose of what is the meaning of my life. And they start feeling the void of heart relationships and close connections, emotional connections in their life. And many of them are not able to articulate it. So one hears it in the stories, in the way they're describing their lives. And even then, they're not able to articulate it. And when they articulate it, it's even more painful because they are beginning to see where the gaps are, and I know my children are having problems. They go to the mother and they talk to themselves, then the mother comes. I'm talking about the more patriarchal traditional societies. Then the mother sometimes tells the father, sometimes she doesn't, about what's happening in the children's lives. And he says, why can't they come and talk to me? I've spent all my life, I've served to make sure. So the gap of uh, relationships and all that they've not somehow not known how to invest in, it starts to show in the later years more. And then the sense of loss of meaning and loss of purpose is just heartbreaking to see somehow. So yeah, every age group, I think, Rima, the adolescence and older age, but just the nature of issues keep changing through a man's life.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Daniel, do you want to tap in?
I just one of the things that's running through my mind as we're talking about this is what is the value of a life? What is the value of a man, right? And I think as has been alluded in previous comments, like it may change, over the course of a lifespan, what our role is and how we fulfill our sort of social obligations, right? Or a sense of like, okay, this is us showing that we are a part of this world in a way that's worthwhile, right? And maybe it's not just as I sometimes like to think of it as like a matter of us being human doings, and it's just everything that we do. It's like our career or whatever else we do. Maybe there is some inherent value to us as people or as men, as women, to exist, right? And how do we, for example, try to, I think some of the things that we've been sort of hinting towards that are important to me are like, how do we look towards like becoming more whole people, where we're able to not just be the one to have all the right answers, but we're the one to be able to listen, and the one to be able to be humble enough to understand that sometimes we have to change our direction.
That's the journey into healing, from being men and women or whatever identities into wholeness, into just being more and more of a person and identifying with that, which becomes more and more difficult now that identities are just such a big thing, where someone is throwing, I'm a woman, I'm a woman, I'm a woman. It's hard for me not to feel like I'm a man, as opposed to, I want to be a person. I may have spent my life working on women's issues and violence against women, but I suddenly start feeling, oh, I'm a man, because identities are becoming so important now, as opposed to moving towards wholeness, as you say, Daniel. Rightly so. Right on.
I think in my work in working with youth and families, I see a lot of mental health now, where they feel that the youth are feeling like it's better off, like their mental health is such a problem for them, and they're not getting a handle on it, that they're better off not being here. So I think it's the lack of purpose and the lack of understanding mental health, and how that you can, if finding ways to work with it, or to figure out what is the best way, and going through the processes of having to figure out what medication may work best for you. I see that it's a daunting thing on the youth coming up. So I know in my work that's a lot that I have to be working with our young people to sort of help them to know that they can live with their mental health. I know it's hard. But they can live with it as well, and figure out ways in order to help them cope with it as best as they can. So I noticed that that's a lot of like despair around our youth in regards to their mental health and coping and living with it, and they cannot see past it. It kind of overwhelms them. So thank you guys for sharing your comments as well. My next question is talking more about the warning signs. So what are the warning signs that family and friends should look out for? Some of the warning signs.
I would like to just share a few that I think are most significant. And one of that is noticing a change in behavior. So someone who's social, like some of the broadly and clearly seen signs could be that.
You come out, I did not plug in the laptop.
Sorry? Can you hear me?
Yes. Sorry.
No worries. So changes in the behavior, withdrawal from, the social setups, staying isolated, or there is dysfunctionality in the routine work. Somebody who was more into, say, watching TV or relaxing with music is not doing any of that. Someone who's talking about death one way or the other, directly, indirectly, maybe mentioning, talking about, say, goodbyes, like, okay, that this, how does death feel like? Any sort of conversation largely about that, or even expression in their creative work. Some people, like through art or through other ways, like music, art, or other ways, just poetry, expressing uh, thoughts of self-harm, talking about it, discussing it, or just withdrawing, as I mentioned. The opposite way, both the things are noticeable warning signs. Then collecting, or storing some lethal things, someone who has right access of an arms or ammunition, lethal weapon, or collecting some of the medications. Like in some parts of the world, it is not hard to collect medications. The prescriptions are not very, very stringent about certain things. So those are largely, warning signs that one can easily see. Of course, mental health, as you mentioned, Kerry, and everyone else agrees, and we are all professionals in this field. We know how mental health in general, if it is not keeping well, some of the diagnosis, and even without diagnosis of depression is highly correlated with suicidal ideation. But even without the diagnosis, if there is prolonged stress, prolonged unhappiness, or mental health concerns, all those can be warning sign when one begins to see in a friend, family member, whoever, that they are beginning to show these differences in behavior. So those are some of the warning signs that come to my mind right away, and I'm sure Kamran and Daniel would have more to add. Thank you.
And Janice, may I go? Daniel, okay. So, as Rima, you said, with depression, it's not uncommon to have ideas of suicide, or what's the point of it, or what is this all about then? How long do I continue with this? So these kinds of thoughts can come easily with depression. So if you have someone in the family, someone close to your friend, who's going through, being down, depressed, just go to, because whatever we say here, you will forget 80% of it, right? Or much more actually. So just Google, find the diagnostic criteria, typical signs of depression, look at them quickly, see whether some of that matches or not. Then the statements of hopelessness and meaninglessness and what's the point, or I couldn't really, I don't know how long I can go on with this. So these kinds of statements get dropped in the conversation often. What I would use to tell people when I was training like counselors, and we would do like fishbowl exercises and have them, role play. And I remember we were doing a suicide exploration intervention. So, and the person playing the counselor went round and round the question of, so are there really some times when you feel like, oh, like what's the point of, like perhaps you, and I was saying, what are you trying to ask? Say it. Because many times when we are trying to have a conversation around it, it's our own hesitation that gets in the way. So if someone is talking about how depressed they feel, how down they feel, how just, oh, it's so meaningless, ask them, do you feel suicidal at times? And it's like it's so hard to ask sometimes directly, as if like by you mentioning the word, you're somehow putting an idea into their heads. Usually doesn't work like that. If they've been thinking about it, they've been sitting with it, and they know that it's not something that people would want to talk about, so they don't talk. Ask it without hesitation. Just ask casually. Do you feel suicidal at times? Do you have ideas of suicide, etc.? So just be upfront. Check with people. Don't hesitate. Don't hide. That it's usually our own discomfort that keeps us from checking in with our friends, with those close to us who are dropping hints, who we are seeing signs that they could be having suicidal ideation. So work with your own issues first. When you're sitting with them, ask them brief, direct, without any ooh ahs. Do you like perhaps sometimes maybe feel like maybe it's getting a little too much? Not like that. Ask directly. And they will let you know. If you ask directly, they will let you know directly most of the time. It's very casual. They'll say all the time, or many times, or just last night, I kept thinking. And then there are certain things to check. But initially, just come up with that in the conversation. And watch your own discomfort first.
I like that, Kamran. Dr. Kamran, thank you so much. Daniel, do you want to tap into that one?
I'll add something briefly. Hopefully Janice can go afterwards. I'm really looking forward to hearing more of her thoughts. For me, one of the things that I find really useful is to think in terms of continuums and degrees of something, right? And so being able to be curious, in my mind, maybe this is an exaggeration, but I think all of us are potentially at risk of suicide if we're pushed to a certain level. Like, I mean, fortunately, hopefully most of us never get close to that, but I mean, I think there's enough things that could really mess up one's life to make one feel really desperate enough that that's the only option, right? But again, I think of this as a continuum that, for example, on the mild end of it might be just like the kinds of things that all of us might have at sometimes, of like just this sort of nagging negative thought, or this little inner critic that's like just bugging us a little bit, and maybe like giving us too much of a hard time because what we cooked didn't turn out, or the way that our makeup went didn't work out, or whatever other things we might find to be hard on ourselves about, right? Which for most of us, like if something like that passes, hopefully it just passes like a cloud and it's gone, right? But then if and as things get more difficult, and there are things that just keep coming, and it turns into rumination where it just like goes around and around, and then it becomes much more difficult. And if those things sort of like get compounded by multiple factors, and it becomes suicidal ideation, or just thinking about I want to die, like, then it's like that, like as Kamran was saying, that's the time where if you ask someone like, do you want to die, like usually it's already in their thoughts. It's not something that you're introducing to them, right? And but even that, so like self-harm is one thing that doesn't necessarily mean someone's gonna kill themselves. Even thinking about dying or killing oneself doesn't mean one's gonna kill oneself. And then there's that sort of final extreme to me of like, okay, you're being so desperate that your only solution, at least it appears in that sort of maybe extreme polarized way at that moment, is to be like, okay, I'm going to kill myself, right? And actually doing it, right? Which fortunately, as much as it does happen, obviously, fortunately, I think it doesn't happen as often as it might, because I think there are hopefully some things within us and between us that, such as being curious and patient and trying to be there for one another, that can help to protect ourselves from getting to that point.
Okay, thank you. I just want us to because we're seeing a lot of suicide ideation, and I just want us to give a little bit of a definition around that. So for the audience members who are not aware of the terminology, so if we can just give a little definition about what that means, so that everybody is aware while you guys keep using that term, so everybody's on the same page as you. So whoever wants to.
Yeah. Well, my understanding is ideation is just a fancy way of saying ideas or thoughts, right? So you have these thoughts going through your head.
Okay. Thank you, Daniel. Sorry, Janice, did you want to take a point at this? The question? Yeah, sorry. Did you want to take it up? The question, I believe I lost my place with the question. I believe it was the warning signs, right? No. It was it was the warning signs. Like, what are some of the warning signs to let family members know that somebody might be thinking about suicide?
So the warning signs vary, and it's like from person to person, and one that might be a warning sign for one person might be a different warning sign, or not a warning sign for another person. And we'll use divorce as an example, or end of a relationship, where one person might be relieved and it's a cause for celebration. This relationship has ended, whether it's a marriage or a work relationship or boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it is, it might be a relief. It might be a cause for celebration. But for others, it might be the end of the world. It might be their one purpose. And so it's really on a individual by individual person basis. And so, but a lot of it is going to be, especially when it comes to strangers, it'll just be seeing signs of maybe physical signs, excessive or risky or abusive behavior, being disrespectful. If it was a stranger, they might just say, I'm sad. Sometimes it happens if you're on public transportation or sitting at the airport, or even just say talking to an elderly person and while waiting in line at the grocery store, and you just look like a person that might be approachable or willing to listen. So, so those signs and symptoms are everywhere and can be different for every person. It just depends on the situation. And so if you know the person, so you're going to be more cognizant of what's out of the ordinary. And so giving away prized possessions, if it's family or a friend or someone you know. Extreme behavior, like suddenly they've booked skydiving expedition and you've known all their life they're afraid of heights. But it could also be something like, it doesn't even have to be extreme. It could be they missed Thursday night bingo and they've been there at bingo every Thursday night. So it could be a break in pattern. So there's just so many. And one is not necessarily the same for another person. So it's just really being mindful and asking questions. And so in the Safe Talk training that I do provide, asking that question, what's the worst that could happen if you ask someone if they're thinking about suicide? So that, yeah, I think that concludes my answer.
Thank you. I want to still tie into that a little bit about family and friends and the support mechanism. Like what kind of support can family and friends, how can they support if someone does say, yes, I am suicidal, or I don't mean to, I have ideation, but I'm not, or I have a plan and I'm planning to do so tomorrow. What can family and friends do in that case?
So family and friends should always familiarize themselves with the available resources that are out there locally or that are available online or through text 24/7, through different crisis lines. And so again, it's and we teach it in the Safe Talk training, is having a resource guide with the different resources and the different methods that you can access those resources. And you might not have them on you like right that very moment, but you can, just talk to the person and say, let me get this, or let me get this information. And of course, follow through. If you're going to promise to get them information, then following through on that. And of course, the other part of the Safe Talk training that we provide is keeping safe for now. It's about not necessarily saying suicide is 100% out of the question, but let's keep you safe for now until you've done this, or until you've spoken to a counselor, until you've message here in Saskatchewan for Indigenous people, we have what's called a talking stick app. And so there are people on the other end of the app that you can talk to 24 hours, 7 days a week. So, and of course that's in line with our Indigenous culture, where in a talking stick format, it's allowing that person to say what needs to be said, and then it's your turn to talk when the stick is passed on to you. So
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Janice, this talking stick is open to everyone?
yes, it is.
Nice.
Nice. I like that's a great. I believe that the kids' help phone is also one, and the one for adults. I can't remember the name of that, but definitely we will put some links to supports after the show. Anybody else want to tap into that one? That question.
Yeah, of course. I think talking to the person wherever we see that warning sign, like as I think Kamran also mentioned earlier, they having that communication, that conversation, because there's hesitation to talk, and there's a myth that if we talk about suicide, someone can get an idea about it. Whereas those with the ideas, they don't sort of get more ideas by talking about it, or less ideas by talking about it. So someone who's thinking about this, if they are talked to, that there is more likelihood that we can make assessment, rightly understand where their minds are, where mind is, what they are thinking about, what the risk is, and accordingly guide the person, help the person with resources, as Janice mentioned, take care that they are safe, take care that they don't have any lethal means. Also ask about what is their plan. If they have a plan, then be aware that they don't have either, whatever the plan is, sharp objects or weapon or anything else around them. So provide that safety, the concern, talking to the people they are living with, whether it's family members or roommates or partner or whoever. So those basic, and
All
also,
right.
sorry, go ahead.
Hopefully I'm not as terrible as this. I feel really
Janice, your mic is on.
challenged. I'm not sure if you got it earlier.
Janice, your mic is on. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, Rima.
No worries.
Yes.
So even while talking to the person, often as a friend or a family, we try to sort of minimize. Oh, what big deal if this happened? You can get over it. There are so many ways. So often minimizing the concern makes it hard for the person to express and talk more. So just a little bit of being there, listening, providing resources, taking care they are safe, right, and talking to the closest people who can be there for them to support, and telling them how valuable their life is to us and to everyone around. So I think those are some of the initial things that one can do, and of course there are tons and tons of resources that we can sort of share with, talk to, take them to the doctor if it is really critical, and then probably, and their mental health or alcoholism or any other substance, there are serious warning signs, then probably going to an ER is also not a bad idea, although that's just temporary. There's more support that is required for the person. So that ongoing care can be taken if we see warning signs around.
Thank you.
Can I add to that? Very valuable. So resources is one thing. And again, when you need it, even then in half an hour, you can come up with a nice list of available, accessible resources in your community around you and online. But that giving the resource is one step. It's always good to keep that relationship with you going, that conversation, because they've opened up with you. They have trusted you with that. So keeping that relationship going and deepening, or at least maintaining that, carrying that through, very important. A referral may or may not allow them to actually use that resource. Even when giving the referral, it's good to check how would that be for you to call them up and to have a conversation. And many times there are a lot of inner resistances, inner factors that keep us from accessing resources that are available. So providing resource, always checking after that. First of all, how would that be? Do you think that's something that does that seem doable? Does that seem useful? I think it would be very important to do this. How would it be for you to do this? So always checking, then staying in touch. Were you able to call them up? How is it going? How was last night? So maintaining the relationship, maintaining the conversation, and then providing resources and referrals, but also checking on how that would be and if they were able to utilize the resources or not, and if not, why not. I went and they were just crazy people talking about all kinds of, I could not relate to them. Then you say, so there was this other one. Do you want to try that one, or how would that be, and how did that? So maintaining or continuing the conversation is very important. Rima mentioned again using other people who are close to them, very important. Connecting them to and reminding them of the resources that they may have. Who has been closest to them in their life before? Not, I would not contact them on behalf of this person, right? Because there might be something in the relationship that went bad, or they may have a hard time showing their vulnerability to this person. They may be able to talk to me, but not to the other. So I would not, it's like confidentiality we talk about, like the person should have a right to decide who they talk to and who they don't talk to about a particular issue. Is this something, a conversation that I may be able to open with you as a friend, but not to the mother, not to the partner, perhaps, because they're afraid of how the partner would be impacted, or to the child, or anyone close to them, or to the parent. So always being very respectful of that. The person, encouraging them to connect with their support networks, finding out where the support networks lie, never assuming, uh, supporting them to talk to the people and to stay connected. Then checking up on, did you talk to them? How did that conversation go? And if it was difficult and if it never happened, that's fine. But always encouraging, suggesting, and allowing them to make that choice. Okay, many different bits to add, but it's up there.
Yeah, it's great. You guys just reinforced the follow through and the relationship building and keeping those things going when you're trying to be helpful and supportive in these kinds of situations. So thank you so much, Daniel. Is there anything else you wanted to add to this?
I just a couple things. I think part of what I think we're talking about is something a little different than risk factors, which might be called protective factors, the things that actually, keep people sort of maybe potentially from doing something really bad to themselves, but also maybe hopefully going in the opposite direction. And as has been mentioned, some of that can be like professional help, like mental health help or other kinds of professional help, as well as it's also been mentioned, it can be friends or family or sometimes even strangers that that just actually care, that actually are showing compassion. And beyond all those things, like it could be other external things, like, okay, there's this song that just like helps them to sort of reconnect with this thing, or there's this other sort of creative venture or something. It could be so many different things. Like just like the risk factors can be multidimensional, so can the protective factors. And one thing I think we often overlook that I think is really critical and kind of goes along with what was mentioned about, for example, encouragement or helping to bring out that courage is what about the resources within that individual, right? How do we sort of try to really like maybe even like access or have that person access the sense that they can believe in themselves, right? And how might that look to actually be not just receiving caring, but being being caring about oneself, and even, you know, as strange as it might sound, like being caring about others could also be, like, for some people I know, that's one of the most protective things, right? Is like, okay, I would kill myself, except I couldn't do that to my kids because I have to take care of my kids or whatever, you know. So that ability to have some kind of role in caring for others can be one of the most powerful things. And again, sort of this, on this really basic level, it's about love.
Thank you, Daniel. That's awesome. And I also wanted just to also too that sometimes it can be religion, because I know some youth have said that I would, but because of my religion, I won't do that, or I couldn't do that. So it's also, yes, the relationship tapping into what they can feel connected to in those sort of times. And we're talking a lot about prevention, but I also want to talk about what things that we shouldn't do. Some of the things that we shouldn't do, because we talked about things that we should do. What are some of the things that we shouldn't do in these situations? And we could just talk. We don't have to go too deep in it, but definitely give some things that what we shouldn't do out there for everybody to know.
Yes, but just taking it from the last thing you mentioned, there are times I also have heard that I would have done it, but my religion doesn't allow it. It's haram, or it's like it's not allowed. And that's probably one of the few times when I say, oh, yes, fine, religion, good. whatever can help a person to say, no, I cannot go that route because God will be upset with me, or it's the soul is not, whatever. But on the other hand, what you are saying, not assuming ever, you know, but what would Jesus think? What would Allah think? Oh, but it is haram. May work for you in your ideology, in your theology, in your ideas, may be totally meaningless for the other person. They may be sitting at a place where they are very angry with God. They may have exactly the opposite feeling of how dare this happen to me? Where the hell was he? You know, so who knows where they are with religion, with faith. So never assuming, always checking with them, again, as Daniel was saying, their strengths, their resources, what has helped you in the past, these kinds of things, and whatever works for them in their ideology, in their theology, in their worldview, building on that, using that, but never assuming that, you know, this is where God or some higher purpose needs to come in. It may or may not work for them. It may be actually counterproductive. So not relying on things that like faith and all. Being very cognizant of confidentiality, as I said, because they've opened up to you, especially because they have trusted you with this information. They are opening up with you. There's a deepening of this conversation. Always respecting that and not taking it elsewhere without the person at least knowing about it. Ideally, you encourage them to do it, to connecting them to the resources. So confidentiality is one. Others, please.
So not calling auntie, not calling auntie and cousins and telling the whole, yeah. Okay.
Oh, sorry, I just want to jump on. So, like, I agree that respect is what we do want to do. So sort of the opposite of respect would be like really disrespecting somebody or ridiculing them, or, you know, these are things that we don't want to have someone feel really invalidated and feel like they're, you know, or even, let's say, daring them, oh, I don't believe you're going to actually kill yourself, right? Like, you know, like those kinds of things are really, I think, sort of distancing oneself from someone in a very alienating and potentially really harmful way.
Thank you.
So
Rima?
minimizing, rationalizing, right? Oh, come on, this is nothing. It's girlfriends come and go, big deal. You'll find there's so many fish and etc. So not to minimize what they're going through. If it's that important in their life and their psyche, there must be a reason. So you just take it with that. So not to minimize, not to rationalize. Oh, but these things happen in life. You know, we must go on. Life goes forward, not backwards. Life and death are together. Everyone must die. So what if one day our time will come? Blah, blah. That's inappropriate. Don't rationalize, don't theologize, don't stay with the feelings, understand what they are going through. Keep the heart connection open.
Rima? Thank you, Dr. Kamran.
I think that exactly makes sense. That's the point I would like to also emphasize on, that when we sort of as Dr. Kamran said, minimizing, rationalizing, both would make the person who's already feeling hopeless feel worse about themselves, right? That I am, once again, it's me who's not seeing it correct. So the only thing that we can do, if we are not trained, if we are not really equipped, it's better to sort of support the person to some or the other professional or resourceful centers. But if we are there as the first responder, as the first person whom the individual has shared their concern, then whichever way we can provide hope, that, and whichever way we can empathize and be with them, is what is required. So anything that takes them further away from hope or deeper into self-doubt, self-critique, self-shame, or uh, a sense of loss would be just not appropriate.
Thank you guys, and I thank you guys for sharing that, because I definitely wanted us to have be able to say, don't say this, and this is what you need to say, you can say. So thank you so much for sharing those opinions. I definitely want to tap into a little bit more about is there a correlation? Do you think that there is a correlation between substance abuse and suicide in men? Anybody want to start with that?
Okay, so the threshold goes down sometimes so we talk about some personalities are more impulsive, so they suddenly feel like doing something and they go ahead and do it. You see that in shopping, you see that in sexuality, you see that in different aspects of our lives. Under the influence of alcohol or some of the drugs, that impulsivity can become much worse. So you suddenly feel like doing something, and ordinarily there are parts of you that would make you say, well, what are the consequences on the other person, on my life, but there are times when you just go ahead and do these impulsive things, much more when you're under the influence. So it does make things worse. So when someone is feeling in that place, feeling low, it helps if they are not using alcohol as much or drugs, etc. So it can put them at risk much more. Marcus can add.
So do you feel like it's a higher risk in men?
High risk, yes.
Risk in men.
Yes. It makes them more impulsive. It makes them more ready to act on sudden impulse that comes. Not a good idea, yeah, if it can be helped.
Okay. Anybody else want to?
So I agree, and I just to add to that, I mean, my sense is that most people who actually choose suicide, or however you want to say it, like, don't do it in a really, they may have thought about it for a long time, but they don't do it in this really sort of calm state of like, okay, I've really deliberated it for a long time. And like, I think it tends, my sense, and I'm not saying this is for all suicide, but my sense is that it's very often, as was just described, like this sense of, okay, like this, I've really had it, and sort of in a particular state of feeling particularly desperate, right? Whereas at other times when maybe our state hasn't been altered by substances, we might be less susceptible to sort of like acting on that, and might be able to just like let it go and go ride through it, and maybe get a good sleep. And I don't know if anyone's ever had that feeling of feeling like really upset by something, and then you get a good sleep and it all seems so much easier to handle in the morning, that kind of thing, right? Like, so yes, I definitely think there's a state aspect that is very critical when it comes to suicide.
Thank you.
And again, being mindful also, which you're very right, Daniel, that many times it's this act of just impulsive act of going through with it. I'll show her, oh, this will show them, or forget it, I'm out of here. But then there is the other kind also, where people have really thought through it. And that is an eerie kind of a feeling when you're sitting across someone who's made up their mind. And those are the cases where you would see someone closing their business in life, relationships, letting go of some of their valuables. And that is a scary one when someone is not doing it in an impulsive emotional reaction to something, but when they've actually thought through, and they are very, very eerie. But there are those times also. So it's not always in an emotional way. There are times, and then you really need to have much deeper, longer conversations with them about why they feel, and what else could they not be looking at, or what they could be looking at, or roles, or where the disappointments or pain is coming from, etc. But there are the other ones that are very quiet and very resolved and thought through process of suicide also.
Well, and just on that note too, I want to mention, like there's this presumption that suicide's always bad, and I think most of us would say in most cases it is. And then there's in Ontario and Canada, there's this MAID, the medical assistance in dying, right? And then so it brings up these issues of, okay, if someone's chronically ill and their condition is deteriorating, and I mean, there are different positions on that, but I've talked to people that have witnessed that kind of experience and seen it as in some cases as being a very beautiful, peaceful kind of process of sort of really honoring that this is a choice being taken, right? I think that isn't usually the case when it comes to suicide.
It's not, yeah, but you're very right that it's a whole range that one needs to be open to, and it can come in many different forms.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Daniel. So it's having a plan. So if they have a plan and they're planning it out, it's definitely more emergency. The intervention needs to happen than if it's ideation, where they're just thinking about it and talking about it. So thank you for that. Are there any unique challenges or barriers that men face when accessing mental health services? That we can talk about, we could tap into? Who wants to go first with that one?
Probably the socio-cultural aspect can be there, especially considering the stigma part. As it is, mental health issues are stigmatized everywhere. I worked majority of my life in India, and then when I first went to US, I was expecting I'm going to a different world, but there also I learned the same, that it's such a stigma to talk about or seek help for mental health concerns. And I hear the same here in Canada. So it is a lot there, but with men, probably it's even more seen as or experienced as a sign of weakness to talk about emotions, weakness to talk about feelings. So I think that's the same in continuity to what we discussed earlier, how it is harder for men to access mental health services. It is, I think, in continuation to that it is harder in general for them to speak, because we have seen today's parents probably fortunately are more aware of parenting skills and needs, but we go one generation behind, and we can see that communication with fathers, hugging fathers, or having gentler conversations was comparatively rare, and it was largely the mother's area to look after those emotional needs. So expressing affection also came very hard to many fathers. Like when I talk to my clients from diverse backgrounds, so if they are my age group, or in their 30s or 40s, or even 50s, whatever, so they don't have that sort of communication and relationship with fathers. So men in I think culturally, socially, across cultures, it's harder to talk and in that way. But as far as accessibility is concerned, in countries that we live in, the first world country like Canada, the resources are available for both men and women. That's what I feel.
I think it's not necessarily.
Yes.
I was more talking about the barriers, not necessarily if there is resources, because yes, we know that there's resources available, but I know you talked a little bit about the cultural stigma and, and also the stigma around mental health in general. I think that's also a barrier. If, Dr. Kamran, you could talk about that a little bit more. So in your practices, the stigma around mental health, and people not really understanding it or not really wanting to tap into it. What are some of their reasonings behind that?
Along the lines of what Rima was talking about, so hesitation, stigma from coming from within, but also in the system. So on the one hand, we have all the resources, but then the way we are socialized and the way everyone else around us is socialized, I would have a hard time accepting that I'm going through a very hard time and I need to ask for help and I need to talk through these things is hard for me. But even if I do open up, for the other side, it may be difficult to allow me to give me the space to open up. Even in programs like in California, I was talking about, this was a battered women alternative place, and it was a small men's program within that. I'm just giving an example of, and things have come a long way since then. I'm talking 80s, 90s. But we were not allowed to open up personal issues with men. For men's program, the limitations were dealing with violence and anger management classes, individual groups, etc. But and not to open up personal issues with them. They say, well, this is not the place for that. And one would say, yes, but it's just opening up so naturally. I say, no. The limitations of this program. So that was an extreme. It was a women's group. It was a women's program for helping women be protected in violent relationships. But there was a hesitation to allow men to, because the fear was that if you say that, well, I get violent, but then, because, so tell me what happened. So this is what happened. So in his mind, somehow he'll start justifying that because these things happened, therefore so he just needs to know this is wrong behavior that needs to be stopped and how to manage his behavior and his emotions. That's what we need to do. And beyond that, anything, then it becomes a justification, which is a concern that one understands. But then there was, I'm talking about more an extreme, but that attitude is there of women needing support to vulnerable, support to, and somehow men don't fit into our picture of that, in our socialized picture of that. Many times I've been in bomb blasts, for example, and dead bodies and body parts, and you would afterwards have a woman crying and hugging each other and tears, and everyone would say, oh, please take care of her, she's having such a hard time. And I said, no, she's doing fine, she's all right, I'm keeping an eye. I'm more concerned about the quiet guy who's sitting in the corner, just turned inwards. He's not crying, he's just, either he'll end up damaging himself or someone else possibly. So but we are more open to giving support to who we see as vulnerable and weak and vulnerable and expressing emotion, and they need support. The ones who stay quiet and just keep it inside, how it hurts them, how it hurts others perhaps around them as a result, one is not as mindful of in the society. We don't see it as much. Those men don't see it in themselves, but others don't acknowledge it either. It doesn't go with our picture of, big, overgrown, shaved, big guy. We just don't see him as what is it doing on a heart level to him, and how is he going to express that in his own life through perhaps destructive behaviors in whatever ways, or in the lives of others around him. Most of us don't, and then God forbid if he ends up being a white man, a privileged white man. I mean, what problems do they have? As a human, it's hard for us to see them as a human being who may still have issues, even though he has no chips to claim. He's neither a woman nor all those things that we see as vulnerabilities these days. If he doesn't fit into anything, are we willing to offer him any kind of support? If anything, we would just add to his burden by saying, look what you've done for thousands of years to all this color and that gender and that. What a horrible person you've been. And now you want to talk about your heartache. Go to hell. What heartache. So anyway, okay, sorry. I go off on tangents.
I just want to extend that a little bit. I think, yes, the issues of, say, vulnerability or limitations are something that I think is a part of any system and any human being, right? We all have vulnerabilities, and unfortunately for a lot of men, most of us have been socialized to see those things as weaknesses. Whereas maybe they're not always weaknesses, right? Maybe like understanding one's limitations, understanding one's vulnerabilities, being able to share them and work through them and even learn from them can be a strength and a source of understanding ourselves more deeply.
Yeah. Kerry, mic.
Oh, it's me. I was thinking it was Rima. So I was saying, Rima, do you want to tap into that? Oh boy.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, all what you guys are saying is, and I just wanted us to. And what role do you think that society has in helping with prevention and suicidal watch awareness? So what role do you feel that society has to play? And do you think that they're doing a good job at it? Two part. For men, to help men better, because I think what I'm going towards is, do we see a lot of men in these in the advertisements in regards to suicide prevention? Do we see, like you said, a lot of men in those sort of promotional way of promoting suicidal awareness or prevention? So I definitely feel like, yeah, do we feel that society needs to be doing more, or are they doing more than 10 years ago? Or is there lots more to do? And what are some things that you guys can suggest? Maybe Bell Talk can hear this discussion and take some of our tips.
I think, just just a small thing, but I think society isn't them. Society is us. Like, we are society, right? And I think it's easy to sort of think of society as this thing that's outside of us, which of course it is. It's also like we're a part of it. We're a part of this changing thing, and our little drop in the ocean can actually matter. And so I think when we try to act in ways that are not trying to sort of rush to solutions and say, okay, it all has to get worked out and it's all going to be done in the next 5 minutes, and so you can be safe forever, but just like trying to go slow and steady and trying to like be patient and persevering, like those kinds of things, I think, are the things that as a society can move us hopefully and towards a more enlightened way of being with one another.
Beautiful. That's on a very personal level. How I am as a man, for all of the friends, students, relatives around, we become role models for each other. So suddenly, if I can sit in a group and I can allow tears to fall and not rush to get a tissue, it suddenly opens that space for other men around to do the same. If I can reveal something about my personal life I don't have to ask them to tell me something about, not in a counseling situation most of the times, but in general, socially. If I can talk about my heart things openly, then they have a chance to do the same. If I can talk about my sexual life, suddenly there's a permission in a respectful way. They have permission to talk about it in not in derogatory or in bad jokes, but in a positive way. So the more we open up ourselves in those areas, the more comfort level we have, the more other people we kind of spread that in line with what you're saying. Daniel, I do see that very much. Uh, as a society, I do feel like, on the one hand, in terms of gender, we are opening up nicely. We are allowing more and more space to be whole, to be more as a person. Again, from my father's generation, grandfather's generation, from even in many cultures, cultures are opening up. Globalization is allowing that. Social media is allowing that. So spaces are opening up more. I do see a problem, as I indicated before, with the gender politics coming in and identity politics coming in, that men often get seen as the more we see each other in those kinds of polarized ways, men invariably get pushed into areas which are supposed to be manly and all, as opposed to other human beings who then are identifying more and more. So the more we play with these identities, it just makes me very uncomfortable, because it's not healthy. It's not healthy for the ones who are claiming to be victims, I feel. I'm not sure if that's really a good thing. If it's an empowering thing or if it's a healing thing, because it's not seen as an intermediate step even. And I don't see that as a healing thing, but it's not good for men, because it does push them into being more in their male identity, and they are seen through that lens. Heterosexual men, even worse, and white heterosexual men, forget it. I'm not one of them, so Daniel, you'll be part of that, maybe carrying that. But the burden on that, given the identity politics, I see that as an unfortunate development in the society. And this is a very political statement that I'm making, and Men 360 is not responsible for this. But I don't see that as a healthy thing for either side, to see ourselves too much identified through the whole identity politics. You all know all the details of it. Certainly very, very damaging for men, in addition to everyone else involved, I think. Unfortunate. That we can have a 2-hour conversation, but I just wanted to flag that as a societal dynamic that
Thank you,
I
Dr.
think is
Kamran.
damaging.
Rima?
Kerry, I think it's at every aspect of society. Like Daniel said, we are the society. So when we talk about we are the society, we are the community. When it comes to, say, community centers specific in Canada, we are the society. When we go to school system, where our youth is getting the initial idea of mental health, we are the society when we talk about universities, when we talk about corporate and business organizations, when we talk about health, like how many family physicians, where most of us initially go to, are aware of suicide risk assessment. How often do they have that conversation with their patients? So I think it's very, very wide. It is all the not-for-profit agencies like the one which we are part of today. This is at a larger scale. So the society incorporates all these places. We have huge scope of starting conversations, talking about it, raising the voice against it, talking about the warning signs, talking about safety, talking about what to do if you yourself, oneself is feeling suicidal. If there are thoughts, what do we do, right? How we give the tips of, if this is happening to someone, we just talked. Similarly, if it is happening to you, whom do you go to? Where do you take help from? How do you make it a point that even though it is uncomfortable, you have that conversation with your loved one? They have the right to know about what's going on with you. So I think these are multiple levels that as a society we can do so much. There's need of ongoing programs in for everyone. And the scope, because university counseling centers, school counseling centers, health centers, everywhere there's scope to have conversation about it.
What about you, Daniel?
I'm thinking about a couple, like I'm thinking of some famous celebrities. Probably most of us remember Robin Williams. I'm not too familiar with his passing, but it does seem like like there were some things that were really hard for him, that and he, he seemed like he had it all, right? And even Matthew Perry more recently passed away, and maybe it wasn't suicide, but it there he had his struggles, right? And so even people that have it, seem to have it all, we all have places that are really hard to get through. And even if we have like material means or all kinds of privileges, it doesn't exempt us from being at risk of certain things, right? So I'm thinking about I'm thinking also, just one other point I want to mention when it comes to society and social norms and who we are and our identity. We don't have to be one thing. In fact, I don't think any of us are just one thing. We are many things. We can have many parts, and we can play many parts.
I just to add, and then I see Janice is coming up on. When I'm doing like resilience trainings or stress management, even, I always say, whether you're a man or a woman, always have 3-4 people in your life that you can have a heart-to-heart conversation with. This is also in line with, as Rima, you were saying, that we ourselves maybe at some point going through these low periods where you say, what's the point? How did I get to this? Is this a dead end? At all times, one should always have 3-4 people in your lives, and this comes much easier for women somehow than for men, because of all kinds of socialization and all. But to consciously think of, are there people that I can not just have a good time with? That is very important also, hang out with, but to have a heart-to-heart kind of a conversation. Is there a sister? Is there an aunt? Is there a cousin? Is there a close friend, a school friend? And these are, one should be very conscious of who these people behind me are, that I can always have a ring up and have a heart to heart with. All women and men should be very conscious of that and have it on your fingertips. These are the people that I emotionally fall back on if I ever need to. Again, for different kinds of issues, different people, but for men, very important to nurture and to maintain these relationships, the heart ones.
I think you're reading my mind, Dr. Cameron, because that was my next question. But I'm going to hold off to that one and just have to get Janice the question, so she may tap in a little bit before we move on to that next one. So Janice, the question is, what I want to say, I'll change it up a little bit. What kind of grade would we give society? Because in the overall consensus so far that we're talking about, I think we're grading ourselves as we're doing pretty well. Society, because I like that Daniel says society is us. And I was thinking, I was pushing it more on not us, because we work in the field, so we're doing our part, but more so what we see, the images and stuff out there. So I want it for you, Janice. How do you think society is doing in regards to suicide prevention, awareness, and all those factors?
I think we're doing so much better. We're doing so much better, but the numbers aren't really showing it, because there are different circumstances always changing as well. For example, COVID. Who thought there would be so much isolation? We're doing better because of the internet, because of social media, because we kind of live in this instant society where we can get like our instant answers and without waiting for an appointment. Access is definitely a lot better. Access to resources. There's a lot more education as well. Whereas, say, just having a conversation about suicide might have been taboo in the past. Or if you mentioned suicide, you would make someone have suicidal thoughts, which definitely is not the case. But we're better, but the world as it evolves is posing different challenges to society. For example, COVID, the loneliness, the isolation, the just general illness, the loss that people experienced throughout the pandemic was significant, and it's about being resilient. So definitely we're having those meaningful conversations, and we just need to have them even more so. And then I think so in the Indigenous culture, women are typically the life givers and men are the life protectors. And so as a life protector, I can't imagine the pressure that people place on themselves, well, that men place on themselves to be a protector in this day and age, with challenges and barriers and everything that life throws at us. So
So it sounds like we're all saying that we're doing better. So
doing better.
we're giving some thumbs up. I mean, definitely we have room to grow because, like you said, the numbers aren't, reflecting how we feel. And because I think we work in it, so we kind of see it a little bit more. I think that definitely we can give it a like a 9. No. Okay, that's pushing it. Out of 10. Let's see. Okay, a 6. Okay, I think or a 7. The consensus is we're at 7 out of 10 for society, and that society, like Daniel said, is us as well, because we have so much to learn and so much. I know for me, and working with teenagers and youth and families, that there's so much more to go, so much more to learn, and still learning as we go. How do we really tackle this, and how do we, as a collective, do our best parts to make that more awareness out there, and more easily supports out there, because I think there's so many supports out there, but how do we feel at being culturally sensitive towards the supports out there? And I really love your group. Again, Janice, what is the name of the group that you do? I forget the name that you said.
Safe Talk.
Safe Talk. I like that as well. And maybe implementing it in a more general, in a more broader view of it, because I haven't heard of Safe Talk. So, which means it's not, and I work with children, families, and youth every day. So definitely I like the Safe Talk aspects of it. So what I wanted to, as Dr. Kamran started, was strategies. What are some strategies out there? Let's give some people some tools to help themselves and to help others. Some strategies out there to help bring more awareness, or strategies to help them in coping.
Can I start?
Yeah, Janice, you can start.
All right. So different strategies, I think, can include within organization onboarding processes, including Safe Talk or Assist. And it can be in everything, whether you're a policeman, social worker, in the healthcare, in the school education system. Include Safe Talk, mental health first aid. If you are working with a more vulnerable group, making sure assist is part of that training, in addition to your standard first aid CPR. So incorporating some of this training into an onboarding process.
I think that's awesome. I like that one. Anyone else?
I just want to build on that a little bit. I did assist training a number of years ago, so maybe not the most recent version of it, but one of my favorite ideas from the last version I went to was about this idea of there being a life side and a death side, and that there can be turning points. And I think that, again, from a sort of point of view that we can know within ourselves that we have choices at given points, and we can, for example, do things that we know are probably going to lead us in not so healthy ways, and we could do things that are hopefully going to be more the healthy, good things, right? And of course, all of us do things that aren't good for us, right? And so I'm not saying like any of us is going to be perfect and make only healthy choices, but if we can try to sort of tip the balance at least sometimes towards like doing something, eating some food, or sleeping, or doing something that's enjoyable and fulfilling, those kinds of things like increase our chance, to me, of us not just existing in our life, but actually maybe living in our life, which again to me is like sort of the ultimate protection against actually feeling like our life has no value, and we might as well end it.
Anyone wants to go next? Who wants to go next? Rima?
Yeah, I would just like to add on to exactly and second what Janice said, what Daniel said, that what can we do? We can do so much. And as she said, and which I also mentioned earlier, all the aspects of society, all the sectors of society, there is scope of talking about it. There is scope of increasing chances of prevention, engaging in conversations and leading to prevention. There are chances of engaging and connecting with each other, as Daniel mentioned, how we need to sort of recognize what is the right thing happening in our lives and connect to each other. Then the interventions have to be in place, timely, the follow-ups, as we mentioned earlier, and also reducing probably the government policies, the policies related to advocacy programs, the policies related to access to lethal means, and all this. There's so much that can be done, right? So there are possibilities at every stage, individual level, family level, society level, at my educational, health sector, community. All the possibilities are there, and yes, this can be done. It's the word that needs to be spread, and go on doing it, talking about it through such platforms. And for men especially, since we are focusing on them, more and more men need to come up and show up and provided that platform to be able to be themselves and talk about feelings. I think, as Kamran also earlier mentioned, the way I live as a man, as my identity, as an individual, as a person, then all those who are watching me, observing me, do get that message, right? All of us sort of spread our energy one way or the other. We impact each other. So that there is possibility both from micro level to macro. That's what I feel.
Thank you. Thank you, Rima. What about you, Cameron?
And yeah, just so suicide prevention is an extreme, but then it's looking at the whole spectrum of just healthier lifestyles and taking care of, especially since we are talking about ourselves also. Always taking stock of your life, getting a sense of where you are. Are you having enough conversations? So verbalizing things, focusing on self, facilitating others in doing that, in talking things out, in putting it into words, to whether even if it's in the process of writing a journal, or ideally socializing and having these in deep heart connections. There's just a level of support that you don't get in a journal, maybe more openness in a journal. But to have conversations, to have meaningful relationships in one's lives, to have meaning in one's life. Very important to encourage each other, but starting with oneself. Because many times it's the loss of meaning that can easily lead to hopelessness and helplessness, and what's the point of it all? And ultimately, existential realities and existential reflections and ruminations are wonderful also. They can be very, very deep. And many very wise people have had very deep existential dilemmas that they have worked through and integrated, and that makes their lives more meaningful. But there may not be a meaning, and maybe it is a matter of creating meaning in life. But then it is important while we are on stage to take on a role and wholeheartedly play that role and stay engaged. And if it means creating meaning, create meaning. Stay engaged in the society, in the initiatives in the society, with a few people. If you don't want larger organizational level engagements, at least with a few people, but heart level, meaningful engagements in life. Having meaning in life is very important at all stages. Beyond that, the well-being on a physical level, on a social, emotional, whatever, that we keep talking about in resilience trainings and all. But having deep meaning and meaningful engagements in the society and in our personal relationships, very important.
Thank you. And I agree with all that you guys are stating. And this taps into my last question as we wrap up the night. So for us, working in the field, working with, hard to serve youth or families, and just being in the field, I wanted to pose the question to you guys. What self-care practices do you do to help yourself prevent burnout and create an emotional well-being for yourself? And then you can wrap it up by giving a little bit of a tidbit too.
A little bit of a what?
Oh, sorry, tidbit.
A tidbit?
Tidbit. I mean, a little bit more about what message you want to close off for tonight. Okay. I say tidbit. Sorry.
Yes.
So one practice that you do for yourself.
So I think especially for those who are in helping professions or those who are in social services, it's we used to teach and we used to learn back in the student days. Very important, as important as it is to take care of the other people, is to be very in touch with where we are with it and to take care of ourselves, to know how it's impacting. Just being with one friend who's going through this kind of a suicidal phase deep is very, very difficult. It can be very draining. One can have this sense of helplessness and very, very heavy. So always looking after yourself. Before that, being mindful of how it's impacting one. So having that reflection, knowing how it impacts me, knowing where is it showing in my life. We all show it very differently in different aspects of our lives. Knowing for very personally, how does it impact me? What are things that are most useful for me? Playing the flute, sitting and playing the flute, lighting a candle and sitting in a room for half an hour, listening to poetry, Rumi, whatever, 15, 20 minutes, and I feel like I'm reconnected again. And maybe not playing, but just listening to flute, or going for a brisk walk, especially in the cold. It's just wonderful. It just reconnects me to a physical level in the here and now. It helps me. Or meditations, etc. There's a range of meditations and mindfulness practices. I think anyone involved in the social services sector, you need to have some kind of a practice, and then general lifestyle things that just help you feel grounded and centered.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I like that. You play the flute?
Mm,
How long have you played the flute?
a few years, yeah.
That's awesome.
Okay.
Okay, what about you, Daniel? What do you do for yourself?
Well, I was just one of the things that I was talking to a client about not too long ago who works in a creative field is how there's this sort of universal hero's story that you can find in like basically any story, any movie. Like there's a sense of there's a build up towards a crisis, and then there's a sort of some kind of victory of of overcoming that, whatever those obstacles are. And of course life isn't exactly a story, and it isn't exactly a movie, and yet like I think we can I find sometimes like those fictional characters sometimes really impactful, and whether it's animated or whatever it is, right, that it can really be meaningful in ways that sort of resonates. And so for me, I like to consume that sometimes to sort of help me get in touch with this maybe experience of as alone as we all can feel sometimes, as isolated or lonely as we might feel at certain moments, that well, if there's a whole bunch of people all around the world that are feeling lonely, maybe we're not as alone or lonely as we may feel at that particular moment, right? And so feeling that sense of connectedness, and then also for me, it's like it's not just being a consumer of things, but also trying to have our own creative outlets. So I really like to write, and again, I don't know if my writing will ever go anywhere really beyond immediate family, but for me, it's a very therapeutic healing process. I had a heart attack last summer, and so I'm even more mindful about things like exercise and food and things like that. So, because we have to take care of ourselves too.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for sharing. I'm so happy you're here with us still. Rima?
Yes. So my go-to place is the walk. Going under the sky is the most important thing for me because I work online, virtual. So by this time, I'm dead tired. My eyes are crying to go off screen. But because end of the day, as soon as I finish my last session, I'll do rest of the documentation later. First thing is going out in the sky. That really helps me. So both my walks and my spiritual practices that I follow, a bit of listening to speakers whom I really resonate with. So those are my go-to places.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. For me, I think mine definitely, I know it's gratitude and just making like a gratitude list and making sure that I'm thankful for things and reminding me that there's bigger things out there that's happening and I can handle the things that come my way. So, yeah, so I appreciate you guys all for sharing your insights and your wealth of knowledge and all your resources and supports out there for. I hope everybody takes the opportunity to re-listen and re-listen to this program and to tap into any one of you that are supporting that they need support with and who just need someone to talk to. So thank you guys so much for sharing your thoughts, your opinions, and thank you, Sivram, for having all of us here to really talk about these issues that towards men's mental health and suicide prevention. And I wrap up for tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Pleasure being here.
Thank you all. I really appreciate that. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you for your input. A lot of information. I was listening. I was even in the discussion this morning, hosting a IMD Sri Lanka in Tamil version. And then the shocking news is that between 15 and 29 age group is the most high ratio is in Sri Lanka or even around the world, suicide. So that's basically what we are understanding is that we are losing the next generation though, right? So that is huge. Thank you, every one of you guys. So Kerry, thank you very much. And also Rima, Dr. Kamran, Daniel, and Janice. It's almost everyone. Even Deepchan is the last minute connection. Janice, I connected on LinkedIn, and then I asked her, and then she said, "Okay, I will do it." So things like that. It's a last minute connection. So whoever wants to be willing to contribute some ways, and then whether it's a one word or one line or one message or the whole discussion can make some kind of impact in somebody's life out there. We don't know. And when that happens, we don't know. So only one message from my side is that out of 2.2 million lives on this sperm coming out, 1 or 2 lives coming to this world to live, to have a better life. And that lives is stopping or end their lives in the middle of their, settling down here and doing, wants to do some kind of a contribution to this world. It is not acceptable under any circumstances. So I really want to thank all of you guys at the same time, whatever way, whichever way we can help send a message, spread the message out and save some lives. Certainly we can do. One message, one thing we are working on, that is initiative of starting a international men's mental health team to support men around the world. Hopefully next year we can start. We are working on that. And like I said, you can check on our social media and please join. At the same time, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, things like that, and then a Facebook group, Voice of Men 360. Watch for another celebration day tomorrow. We have one event from Malaysia, 7 to 8:30, and then 10 to 11 from Canada. So we will have a couple of more events coming on, speaking on zero male suicide. Thank you guys. And also there's a one discussion from India to South India. So there will be 3 actually. So thank you everyone. I really appreciate. Have a great night and then enjoy the rest of the weekend. Thank you.
Everybody. Nice meeting everybody. Good night, everybody.
Good.
Great job, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Thanks.